Hello, and welcome to another edition of Agenda 2063 TV show, the only show in Ghana, the continent, telling you authentic stories about Africa's integration. My name is Ike Benson Jr., happy to be coming your way today. We have yet another special guest as part of the interviews with the International Organization for Migration, IOM, who are the UN agency responsible for migration. They've been around for a long time, over 70 years, and they've been doing some great work on helping change the dynamics of migration governance on the continent as it relates to the continent, the AU, and so on and so forth. Of late, they've been doing some more work on cross-border trading, on freedom of movement protocol, very important things that are critical to how the Africa agenda should develop. And so today we're happy to have someone who has a law enforcement background. In fact, he was once a detective inspector who has a wide variety of experiences that have helped contribute to the conversation and the work that he does at IOM. So we have Mr. Marcellino Ramkushin. If you are there, Mr. Marcellino, nice to have you.
Absolutely. Good afternoon.
Oh, okay. At what point did you stop being a detective inspector? When did you realize that you were tired of law enforcement?
It was a very precise moment.
Yeah.
A large number of irregular migrants arrived in the port of Durban and put their arms up and said to me, "We seek asylum." And as a policeman on the forefront of my country's border protection, I didn't understand what that meant.
Oh.
And I resigned promptly from the police and became a humanitarian worker.
Wow. We hope to read the book on that epiphany one day. but nice to have you with us. For those who don't know who you are and what you do, it'd be good to get a few minutes of an introduction from yourself. We'd be very happy to have that, please.
Thank you. So my name is Marcellino Ramkushin. I'm the Regional Thematic Specialist for Immigration and Border Management for the International Organization for Migration. I'm currently based at the regional office in Nairobi, and my current remit allows me to facilitate a number of key border management interventions for both the regional economic communities as well as for member states directly through our missions in country. Our primary work currently is the facilitation of mobility in the Eastern Horn of Africa. IOM recognizes future benefits from mobility, and one of our jobs is to support member states at concurrently providing protection measures for migrants on the move. We also recognize that it is an inherent right. So a lot of our work right now from border management is realignment, is getting people to see border management and trade, as Mr. Bensa mentioned, getting to see border management and the impact on gender, getting to see how border management in a regional context with border communities, how all of these actually have a benefit and how we need to change the paradigm. So a lot of our work is advocacy in changing the mindset on border management, taking it from security to a facilitated place. I always like to say this, borders and integration, these spaces are very valuable. And I'd like you to think about this from this way. Are they our last lines of defense or Africa's first line of development? That's really what we do. So we provide a number of key things: infrastructure, training, etc. And we really follow consultations with member states on that, Benza.
And I, as part of the important conversation that we have also is how legal identity, civil registration, and statistics, how all these are essential to what we have been calling mobility. And especially now that we have the African Continental Free Trade Area, the mobility component is, part of the freedom of movement, that kind of thing. Why are these things so important? Legal identity, civil registration, vital statistics. Is it that mobility cannot happen without these things?
So there are facets of mobility that can take place without this, some of them within regular norms, some of them in irregular norms. However, legal identity, civil registration, and statistics provide intertwined data. Now, in the development nexus, this is very, very important. Besides the fact that everyone actually has a right to be recognized as a person before law, and that's where identity management really starts, the civil registration process. It allows for you to be able to access services throughout your lifetime. And this is a key thing to development. The development of the individual is integrally tied to the development of the state. So we see that mobility can take place outside, but access to structures such as reliable health, education, housing, banking, jobs, emergency assistance, all depend, and regular travel, all depend on proof of legal identity. So it's an important component that we want to say would be very beneficial for member states to be involved in. Firstly, the identification of their citizens gives them an obligation to take care of their citizens, but providing the freedom of movement may actually benefit member states in ways they've not seen yet. So very important. And we also need to recognize that a credential needs to be verified in somebody else's territory. When you move from one territory to another territory, the sovereign right that you have to enter is guaranteed under our free movement protocols, but it is not exactly free. It requires you to produce an identity document. And that's for many reasons. We have security, we have a number of other issues that plague our regions in Africa that we need to also look at concurrently. So I think in the most important comment, it would assist governments and provides direction to migrants on planning their lives and planning their government's strategies.
Excellent. And of course, associated with that, one of the things that we were supposed to find out was talked about development derivatives. Can you kindly unpack for us what that means? I think in general we understand what development means, but just the nitty-gritty of what the derivatives bit means.
Okay, I know. I really like these two words, development derivatives. It gives me inspiration because I feel I'm going to get something that's not really there yet. And I always see this like this. So the development derivatives, for me, these are the gains that a person, a state, a structure, or government can benefit from through actions implemented by states in their development agendas. Some of them are tangible. Some of them can be really converted into a cash injection, an increase in your personal income. But these derivatives cut across multi-layered sectors of our society. Some of them we don't really impact, like the freedoms of movement, access to mobile money. These have all come as a result of integration in our region. So we are feeling the derivatives, but I feel that firstly, we don't sell it well enough to the people that it matters the most, the people on the ground. They need to know that we've made changes and that these changes impact on them. So it affects the state and region differently, but these have a cyclical nature in them. For every benefit that a citizen may accrue, that benefit will be felt by the state. And that in turn will be a benefit that can be sent back to a citizen. So there is a very good way of looking at, for me, the integration agenda, but how the integration agenda is dependent on identity, but how those derivatives can only be gained if you produce who you are. And that's the really important point. I think the last part I want to really make mention of is it gives you access to rights and freedoms. The derivatives are the catalyst for the rights and freedoms of the IGAD and the EAC, Common Market Protocol and the Free Movement Protocol. You know, and there are other things that we also need to recognize. Movement equals the movement of ideas.
Yes.
Movement equals an African's ability to dream. These are not things we factored into a development derivative. For me, the idea to be inspired is a derivative of being in Kenya. So I see things very much in a tangible way, led by policy, but also that development derivatives are needed, but can only be gained through mobility. The chance to be able to experience a thing is something we are also lacking in this region.
So what you're saying is that if without mobility, the development derivatives would be a bit more elusive. It'd be very difficult to aspire to get to them.
Absolutely, Bensa. There are thoughts that take place when you move 100 meters, but there are businesses to be built when you move 1,000 kilometers.
Yes, you know? Yes.
And in Africa, to move $1 is to be a business person. So I'm always happy to see that this is a reality. I live inside this world with this business.
Even as we talk about mobility, one of the things that I realized, though, that the Agenda 2063 has 7 aspirations. And even though one of the flagship programs of Agenda 2063 is the freedom of movement, curiously, when you look at the 7 aspirations, there's no real explicit focus on freedom of movement. Of course, I guess you could say this is where IOM comes in to help hammer home the points why freedom of movement is so critical. But could you kindly help us understand why some of these points that we were talking about earlier, civil registration, legal identity, are essential to Agenda 2063 agenda?
I really like the title of Agenda 2063, The Africa We Want. And yes, that's probably 1 billion individuals wants.
Yeah.
So the Africa that we need to look for in the future needs to be pretty flexible.
Yeah.
And, from our experience as an organization, from our partnerships, what we have realized is that mobility generates a number of things. It can generate funds, it can generate ideas, it generates change. Yeah. And although missing, I think the alluded part is really when we look at what the prosperous Africa, the inclusive growth, sustainable development points are: their incomes, jobs, decent work, poverty, inequality and hunger, social security, protection, and modern and living and basic quality services. Again, all of that is hinged on one singular factor. Who are you? And where are you from? And the only thing that you get from that is the fact that you would want you have to identify yourself. So when we look at 2063 and the Africa we want, the movement we want, the trade we want, the ability to experience the cultures of other places, to speak to peace and security, to speak to better trade relations, none of this really takes place without a singular foundation for 2063. And that's the ability for an African to move from one place to another. And doing that legally.
And in your view, as someone who has been working also on cross-border work a lot, as well as with your experience in law enforcement, how optimistic are you that we are on the right track, or as per what you have seen, at least in East Africa?
I'm going to speak, Bensa, because I've traveled on the continent. I am so optimistic and so happy at what I've seen. I come from a very strict security law enforcement background, and I've been exposed to a trade and humanitarian and migration background. The borders I worked on 10 years ago do not exist anymore.
Oh, wow.
The integrated border management, OSBPs, trade corridors, and bilateral arrangements in Africa are sorely understated in the international community. If people really felt Africa's pulse when it comes to what we're doing in border management, yes, we have problems and we have crises, etc., but we are managing it better than any time in the last 60 years. This is a testament to Africa's integration. I think it's slow. The wheels do move slowly. But what I've seen in terms of trade reduction, 15 days to 3 hours, that equates to cash on the continent.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's a very important point. I think people get excited by the word of cash transfers and mobile money and all these things. These are very essential points to mobility. There's been a lot of talk about. I'm sure you will know that in the conversation on the African Continental Free Trade Area now, there's what they call the Pan-African Payment Settlement Systems. I know this was not probably one of the questions that's it's a kind of a surprise question, but it's kind of coming out because as we're talking mobility, it's just kind of to me is reminding me that, well, you can't do mobility if you don't have money either on your pocket or on your phone now. And in your view, with your experience, how well do you think the two are going along? With money on your phone and in your pockets, remittances, and alongside this whole conversation on registration, legal identity, and so on. How far, in your view, has it gone?
I would like to start with the fact that we don't have the time to develop a system westernized like the Europeans or the Americans in banking. We've lost that time. However, the most positive thing in my personal life as a migrant myself has been mobile money banking. I haven't carried cash. which has reduced the threat of theft, which has reduced the theft of fraud. I'm able to send money in exactly 60 seconds to my mother. I also pay remittances, ladies and gentlemen, back home as an African migrant myself. So all of this has benefited my life completely. We don't carry cash. The speed at which you can conduct yourself, whether you are running a small, tiny little corner side business or you're an international trader on this continent now, has been leveled. Yes, it's such a positive thing. What we are missing is the correct use and access of those markets. For example, just to give you a very quick example, access to mobile money should actually be better and increased in border areas where the cross-border trading people actually have access or need access to this kind of facility. So a little bit of restructuring, but it is going to be one of our saviors, digital banking for Africa.
Amen, amen. Well, so the future is bright, clearly, and we're very happy to hear that. The IOM has, as I've been doing quite a bit of monitoring on how far IOM has come with the conversation on mobility, I realized that of late it's been doing some work with the AU's statistics agency, which suggests something, that the collection of data is becoming increasingly critical. How important is data collection in contributing to the development derivatives that you've spoken about?
So access and use of high quality data is an absolutely instrumental part of this conversation. And it is a must for development impact. One of the things that we need to understand is that high quality development data is a foundation for us, for meaningful policy making, for responses during pandemics. Data has so many needs and so many places that we can't ignore it anymore. But the Africa that we're living in right now is focused on service delivery. And that's where the real market for big data, citizen data, open data, and public service delivery data has a real market, is where we want to hone our systems to respond to the needs of migrants, citizens, etc. So the data market for me is also Africa's next gold mine.
Okay.
You know, the ICT capabilities that we need to develop to run our continent need to be staged up considerably if we want to feel the benefits of integration, but also if we want to compete as a continent with other continents. Trade, migration, etc. We need to really collaborate if we want to impact firstly to each other, but on the outside. Unfortunately, even as we get more technology on data and it's easily to actually access more data, what we do find is that there are data black holes, Bensa. Data black holes in the sense that in some of the places where we really need data to be captured more effectively, we don't have data stations, data sets coming out of that. But those are the people that actually need the responses. So we are a little bit off the mark when it comes to data internationally from every organization's point of view, I think, because of the nature of mobility. People choose really difficult pathways. Sometimes it's not always possible to get solid data from that. However, having said that, I must tell you that I'm personally involved in installing computers at border posts throughout East Africa and throughout the continents. One of my remits is that we give member states systems to use. And in terms of generating just basic migration data, the continent is doing so well. Almost every country is moving from manual to digital. Fantastic. And that's a huge step for us. Absolutely, yeah. You know, and I think the other points on data that I really want to make is we're also missing the type of data that allows us for planning. Like, for example, data from RECs on water resources, the availability of water resources, but also how that impacts on climate change. That's the kind of data that's really evasive at the moment. But we are doing better. I think partnerships really bring a lot more in terms of what we can do with data. Fundamental building blocks of data, again, start with civil registry. I want to just pose a question that doesn't have to be answered. Everyone that's sitting on this call, if you're not in your home country, the only reason you're sitting where you are is because somebody registered you at birth that allowed you to eventually get a passport.
Yes.
And the fundamental building blocks, ladies and gentlemen, of our mobility and our ability to earn is to get our population registers, our civil registry registers, to put them down and to do something that I think we've not really done. we need to now recognize that our own African populations are the populations we want to tap into. But we can't tap into them if we don't know who they are, where they are, and why they are. So for me, the data thing is also a huge component of the next 10 to 15 years, especially in regions that have got confirmed REC relationships. RECs will also be a huge supporter of Africa's continental growth, but from a REC perspective. But before that, we really got to start back home by registering at hospitals.
Fantastic. And Mr. Ramkushin, I think the other thing probably that needs to be asked is, you work in a country that really gave birth to the whole conversation on mobile money. M-Pesa, Kenya. It's always very exciting to have conversations around technology, mobile money, because from an African perspective. In your view, do you think that Kenya itself and the larger region has benefited from the fact that this whole idea came from Kenya, and therefore it's leveraging for the rest of the other countries in the region and then spilling over to the rest of the world? Do you see that Kenya has moved very far, and what lessons do you think possibly we could learn from Kenya for other African countries as the REC conversations also begin to be consolidated?
So I want to start with the article I read about 2 years ago in The Economist, very specifically on Kenya and its love for mobile money and the threat it posed to international money laundering. It didn't come true.
Okay.
Yeah, that was a lie. What the threat was the success of mobile money that many countries around the world and institutions and banks actually feared, is that Kenya would bring a product that would actually change the game. And here's what the good thing is that Kenya didn't bother going through traditional old school banking systems. It went digital, and there was no loss. There was a greater investment because people have much greater phones in in their phones. People value their phones. We have a million different apps, we have payment systems, etc. But now if you can walk around with your life in your hand, including your medical records, your travel history, this is the kind of freedom we want. The lesson that we learned, and I want to bring a very South African context to your question. South Africa prided itself on having the most eloquent banking system on the continent till M-Pesa. And we bowed down to M-Pesa. I now am sending money to my country using your system developed in this part of the world, which I think is an amazing thing. Real-time money is real-time development. Real-time money is real-time medical care. Real-time money is real-time assistance to children that might need it in education. So the way it's changed the game, it has forced governments to look at fraudulent systems more deeply, especially those that occur on cyber systems. It has forced governments within the context of RECs and within the context of international banking to rethink financial institution regulations. It has forced governments to tap into, for example, in my country, we have a very styled Muslim banking, which is legally in our constitution and attached, only came about because of Hawala and mobile money. So these ideas that are being generated have to come because we have to be evolving what we do. And mobile money for me evolves everything. It gives hope to small business. It gives hope to families in destitute situations, migrants. I also use mobile money as a means to gather funds sometimes. So I think in many ways it's serving a purpose that was really going to be protracted by international financial institutions. We must remember that nobody makes money for free, it's for interest. But the interest rate on using a mobile phone is so low that you actually feel you are profiting by using the system.
Okay. And on that optimistic note, Mr. Marcellino Ramkushin, thank you so very much for taking time out of your very busy schedule to speak with us. Your presentation was very engaging, and we hope to have a part 2 someday. Really, really appreciate these insights. And I'm looking forward to your book on how you move from law enforcement to IOM. It needs to happen. So thank you once again. And to all those who also followed the program, there will be a recording of this in a couple of days, and we'll definitely share the link with you. So
thank you. My pleasure, Ben. Thank you.
Thank you once again, and have yourselves a great day. My name is Ike Bensa Jr., and this was Agenda 2063 TV show. Have yourselves a great day. Goodbye.